Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of people come to me, like you said, because it's a habit or because it's making changes to their teeth, but they're worried that this is their child's only way to soothe themselves. And they're rightfully nervous to take away that habit because what will they do? And what I've learned over this time of helping about 300 kids to stop thumb and finger sucking is that children become stuck with thumb sucking, and many of them haven't learned a lot of the really wonderful ways of calming themselves beyond thumb sucking. So I propose it to kids as, let's explore some new parks. We all love going to a park. Park is great. And thumb sucking, in my analogy, is the first park you visit, one of your first parks. It's extremely relaxing. It feels awesome. But you want to move on and try other parks. And that's a lot of the work I do, is getting children, first of all, comfortable with the idea of exploring new things and then finding what works for each child.
I especially like that point because we also want to be sensitive to the fact that some kids come to us with the need to suck on something, a thumb, finger, sometimes it's clothes. And it may be because they had a history where they needed that extra calming. So can you tell me a little bit with Cassidy, and maybe you can have Cassidy jump in here too. What are some of the things that you taught her in terms of calming that we could substitute for thumb sucking?
Cassidy, can you think of some things that you learned to do with your mouth, to keep your mouth happy, that was different than using your thumb? Can you show us?
Oh, you're going to teach about that service. Can you make sure you speak loudly?
I'm gonna do caves.
Okay. Cassie learned some special things to do with her tongue, and she's going to show us some exercises that she learned. She's going to show us some caves.
Okay.
Those are beautiful caves.
You're making a cave with your mouth.
Mm-hmm. And for some of the orofacial myologists watching, you might notice that Cassidy's had a tongue tie release. We can talk about that as well. Cassidy, were there things that you used for chewing that you really liked? Was that a new park for you? Can you show me some of your chewings?
This is my chewy necklace. It clips like this, and you can wear it. And when you need to chew something, you can chew this purple pouch. I have 3 of them.
You have 3 of them. Amazing.
That's fantastic. So that's one of the ways that she learns to calm down. We need to always provide a substitution for the thumb. What about in terms of sleep? That was another thing that I found as I was first getting trained in this really surprising, because doesn't sucking your thumb help you fall asleep? Why would it be one of our surprises that sleep actually gets better? Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Anne?
Sure, that is really surprising. But research shows that children, especially children who are sucking during the night, miss out on a lot of deep sleep. In fact, they come out of their deep sleep to suck. So when the sucking is eliminated, they go into deeper, more restful sleep. And I have seen this many times. I had a child this year whose parents were trying everything just to get her to sleep through the night. She stopped sucking her thumb and the problem was solved. It's amazing.
Wow. So the quality of the sleep is actually better?
The quality of the sleep is much better.
I was wondering if I can ask Shannon a question about that too. Shannon, is that something that you've noticed with the change in Cassidy? Did you have any concerns about sleep when she was still sucking her thumb, and did you notice any changes after?
Actually, one of the reasons we started seeing Anne, because we were noticing how much she was just popping it in the middle of the night. She was even, we had reasons that caused some regression, just like a natural quitting on her own. But then we were noticing that she was still popping it in throughout the night. She wasn't even falling asleep with it, but it would go in. But we've noticed just how much more energy she has first thing in the morning. We were telling Anne that it would take, a solid 45 minutes for her to be ready to be around people when she would wake up previously. And now, she sometimes still likes to read in bed, but it's not like a groggy hang out in my room thing. It's I'm up and I'm ready to be with people. So we've definitely seen a difference in that early morning energy too.
Mm-hmm. Melanie, I should make a little caveat there that when there is disruptive sleep, I'm definitely checking with an ear, nose, and throat doctor because sometimes there's thumb sucking with airway disturbances. So we're definitely ruling that out.
And how would that tie in, whether it was with Cassidy's situation or with another, when it comes to having tethered oral tissues, which we've talked a lot about on these events? But I know, Anne, that's a specialty of yours, and you mentioned that Cassidy had a tongue tie release. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship between energy, sleep, and the tethered oral tissues?
Sure. When the tongue is tethered low in the mouth and the person is sleeping, the tongue tends to drop back into the airway. And we can often find sleep disordered breathing. I'm not talking just about apnea, but we know that children should be quiet in sleep and in deep sleep. And so in Cassidy's case, she was being disrupted by thumb sucking, but also by the fact that she had a tethered oral tissue, which she's now had released. So we're seeing a double benefit for Cassidy now.
That's fantastic. I have a question that is probably surprising, but maybe not so surprising considering everything that we're going through right now with the pandemic. But what about germs?
What about germs? Germs is a big reason. It's one of my top reasons why I love to do this work. I've had the pleasure of doing this work through the COVID crisis, and it's even more motivating right now to keep children's hands out of their mouth. We're talking here about thumb and finger sucking, but I'm also working on fingernail biting, anything that's getting the hand to the mouth. And a lot of children with thumb and finger sucking habits develop hand, foot, and mouth disease, but they're also just exposing themselves to way more germs. And that's something that I explain everything to children very clearly on why they would want to stop thumb sucking. I want them to be a really responsible consumer, and they understand, and that's a big one for them usually.
I have a question for Shannon and Cassidy on that same note. So Cassidy, I have a question for you, sweetheart. What are you learning right now about washing your hands? Do you have to wash your hands a lot or not very much, or?
A lot.
A lot right now, right? Yeah, a lot to help keep us all healthy. So prior to working with Anne, Shannon, were you, and prior to the pandemic, of course, I know you're a teacher, so you're focused on keeping all the kids healthy in the classroom. And I know hand washing is a part of the elementary school routine, but were you in particularly concerned about the fact that she was also sucking on her thumb and that relationship to germs, or how did you feel about it prior to the pandemic?
Truthfully, in our case, it wasn't happening very much during the day. But however, yes, it was definitely one of those things where we were probably extensively aware of how frequently she was washing her hands, but especially at night before she would go to bed, there was always a go scrub them down.
Yeah.
So that we knew that she was actually going to bed with clean hands. And I do know how grateful I was that it wasn't an issue during the day.
Yeah.
Many of the children I'm working with are sucking all through the day at school. And they're getting sick a lot.
Wait, I wanted.
Tell me, Cassidy, what you wanted to say. Did you want to say something?
Did you want to say something?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
I have this squishy thing to keep my hands happy.
Cassidy's still telling us about the new strategy she found for calming, and she had a lot of things to keep her hands happy.
So it keeps your hands busy so they don't go in your mouth? Show me what you can do with it. Whoa, it's really squishy.
And
That's so fun.
You can put your finger through it, and then all its things go through. Like
oh my goodness, that's fantastic.
See?
I love it. I love it.
Beyond the hands and the mouth, in terms of ways to calm, I'm often talking to children about deep belly breathing and many other body strategies that they can use, and also ways to handle anger. I mean, that's all. It's a very comprehensive approach.
I love that. You know, I think what we're going to do, because I want to talk to you a little bit more, Anne, and I know it's getting really close to Cassidy's bedtime, is I think we're going to go ahead and say goodnight to Cassidy and her mom. And thank you both for being here. It's so helpful to, especially Shannon, to have your viewpoint. I know there are a lot of moms tuning in tonight. So thank you so much. And Anne and I will take it from here.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Bye, darling.
Cassidy.
Bye. She loves you.
Bye, Shannon. Bye, Cassidy.
All righty. Here we go. Well, okay. So just to recap, Cassie's so cute. I just loved it.
Great.
But just to recap, first of all, we're talking about 5 surprising things that happened when Cassidy stopped sucking her thumb. But this is true for many, many children that you work with. They learn new ways to calm, which is always a fear of the parents that if we take away the thumb, like they're going to be so upset. How are they going to learn to calm down? So, and I totally understand that. So new ways to calm. Surprisingly, the kids learn to have a better quality of sleep, better sleep in general, because they're not waking up to get back to sleep with their thumb.
Right.
And then the third one was, and I thought Shannon, Cassidy's mom, focused on this just beautifully. She immediately said the amount of energy that Cassidy has now, because she's getting better sleep. She's getting more oxygen, really, right? Yeah. And
Totally.
oxygen is everything.
I would say to that, in terms of more energy, it's on many levels. It's more energy from having better sleep. But we also know that when you suck your thumb, you're releasing a lot of neurotransmitter. And many of these children are actually feeling kind of dopey a lot of the time. And so when you take away, when they move on from the thumb, the neurotransmitters settle, and really these kids kind of come out. They feel more balanced, less sleepy, more ready to engage, whether it's in imaginative play or talking. One child I worked with was dancing in her classroom when she stopped sucking her thumb. It was amazing.
I love that. I love that. So often I see kids kind of zone out when they're sucking their thumb. And if they're doing that in the classroom, they're not really attending.
Yeah. And the neurotransmitter response is really clear. We understand why they feel that way.
Yeah. Well, and finally, our fourth one that we talked about with Cassidy and Shannon were just the fact that now we don't have to be as worried about germs, because we're trying so hard to teach all of us not to be touching our face, but especially kids not to be chewing their nails, sucking on their thumb, etc., and give them some other options that they can chew on that we can easily wash and keep sanitized. But I had one last surprising one that I wanted to share with everybody, Anne, and I was wondering if you could take a minute and just talk a little bit about the developmental path and facial development that we want these children to be on from infancy on into the elementary school years. So I know we really want kids to stop sucking their thumb by what age, ideally?
Well, it's earlier than we expect, really.
Yeah.
Thumb sucking is normal in the early stages of the first year. But really, we know that discriminative mouthing, coming to chew things and use the whole mouth, happens pretty early within the first year. So we would like children to move on to that like they should. But if they do get stuck, the changes to the palatal bones, the bones that form the floor of the nose, are happening quickly. And so if we can get children to stop, sorry.
I'm going to pause for 1 second because I know we have a lot of parents listening. I've got my throat scope here. I'm just going to show everybody my palate as you're talking. Okay, go ahead.
So we know that thumb sucking is moving those bones in the palate. And if you look at Melanie's face, the roof of the mouth is the floor of the nose. So we're actually taking a palate that wants to be wide and arched and making it narrow, more steeple-like. Mm-hmm. And that's happening with thumb sucking. When we look at thumb suckers, we can often see the shape of the little thumb right in the palate. So
it's just like Play-Doh.
Really, we would
molded right up there.
We would like them to move on within the first year. But the approach that I take, that I'm talking about with Cassidy, a comprehensive approach, is most useful from 3.5 on.
And that's where most kids, I think most parents call after about age 3 and saying, kind of thought she'd grow out of this and I can't get her to stop. Can you give me some ideas? And that's why I think it's so helpful to have these 5 surprising facts, because there are so many benefits for kids to stop thumb sucking. When I have one last question around that, and then we'll wind it up for tonight, and we'll take a few questions from the audience as well. But with the roof of the mouth, as that thumb pushes up there, we also know that impacts the way the child develops what we call a mature swallow pattern, which we've talked about in other videos. So we won't go into that in depth right now. But when they're pushing up and we're starting to create more of that high palatal vault, what's happening to the rest of the facial bones in response to that, and the muscles?
Making a huge change to the rest of the facial bones, talking about changes to the maxilla, the upper jaw, to the relationship between the maxilla and the mandible. Most common changes in the dentition are an open bite or an overjet, where the front teeth are coming out more, or a posterior crossbite. So we're seeing changes in relationship of the upper jaw to the lower jaw. And then we see major changes to the facial muscles, because this face has not engaged in chewing, in heavy, strong chewing. Instead, it's more flaccid, it's engaged in sucking. So there is a lot of change.
That's fantastic. And one of the things I always want to keep in mind, and we talked about it with Mary Billings recently for Holland Healthcare, is that the bones and the muscles, they work collaboratively, especially as our face is growing. So if we push too hard on one bone, it's going to shift everything else and essentially torque things. And the muscles begin to follow. And that's where they really need to come and see someone like you, a certified orofacial myologist. And just in closing, can you just explain to everyone what the art of orofacial myology is all about, and how long you've been doing this?
Sure. The art of orofacial myology, for me, is related to speech pathology. I'm a speech pathologist. I could also be a dental hygienist and have this special certification in orofacial myology. We're looking at the muscles of the face, particularly the lips, tongue, and jaw, and palate, and making sure that the muscles of the face are developing normally.
Fantastic.
I want to say, in conclusion, though, about thumb sucking, something we just maybe didn't touch on quite enough, is that children feel incredibly empowered.
Yeah.
It's often the hardest thing that a child's had to do in their life, to overcome a habit like that. And I just take real joy in seeing how empowered and strong they feel by doing something that they thought was going to be hard. And in fact, it was fun, and they feel so strong.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it brings back the memory of when I first met you. I think it was like 18 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at your office and we were talking about thumb sucking, and you pulled out this gigantic 3-ring binder, and it's nothing but children, the kids you've treated, going like this with this big, I'm so proud of myself grin on their face, right? That they did it. Yeah. So once they stop, they get to be in that book, and you're so proud of that book too.
I'm so proud of them being able to say I can.
Being able to say I can. I love that. Okay, everybody, let's take some questions. Don't forget that just for the next 24 hours, Holland Healthcare, you probably know them as Throat Scope, and recently their Facebook page changed to Holland Healthcare, named after Jennifer Holland, the wonderful mom who invented the Throat Scope, and now has the Telscope oral healthcare or oral exam system as well. So make sure you visit their website. Casey from Holland Healthcare is posting that information for you, as well as the discount code that you can use for the next 24 hours. But what I'm going to do is, because I could see as we were chatting, there were so many good questions flying by on the screen here, that I'm going to pop up a few questions so we can all just learn from each other. Lizzie has a really good one here. I'm going to pop it up on the screen. She says, is there a comfort item like a blanket or a stuffed animal, etc., associated with the thumb sucking? Would you remove that as well if there was? And would you replace it with something else, or just try to replace the thumb sucking alone?
Okay, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Most often there is an associated object or an associated activity, like pulling on the ear or rubbing the bottom of the nose.
Twirling your hair.
Twirling the hair. So with the associated activities, I have found that most often those secondary behaviors go away with the thumb sucking. With the blankets and stuffed animals, I really handle that on a case-to-case basis. I'm really working with the child as a thinking, problem-solving human being who, when they understand the approach, can make a logical decision. And I usually give a couple of options of what we could do with a stuffed animal in a really loving, kind way. So I would have to answer that specifically for your child. But it's usually not a problem. We just handle it either in finding an alternate, or in giving the stuffy a break, or in just working with the child on how to handle the stuffy without sucking the thumb.
That's fantastic, because sometimes that stuffed animal is the antecedent for the behavior of thumb sucking. It reminds them, and automatically the thumb goes in. But if we can help it, I prefer not to take that lovey away. If we can substitute the thumb sucking and still keep the lovey in place. But I love how you said it's really a case by case basis, and that really is the art of this, is figuring out what's going to work for that child and for that family.
In fact, Melanie, many of these stuffies come to my home on vacation, and pictures are sent of them to their parents. So that's one of my answers.
I love it. On that same note, Judith has a good question here. What age do professionals get involved in getting rid of thumb sucking?
I was taught 5. But since then, I've been asked by dentists locally to work with 4-year-olds, and recently I've gone as young as 3.5.
I think it just varies a little bit, but roughly 3.5. We can certainly provide strategies for that birth to 3 population, where we're giving strategies to the parents on how to help a child stop pacifier use and thumb sucking before we get to that 3.5-year-old stage. But as I said earlier, as much as we try to do that early intervention, we still get a lot of kids on our caseload that we just thought they were going to grow out of it, and they just need a little extra support, like from you, Anne. Priscilla had a really good question here. She said, where can I purchase a chewy necklace? Is it possible that a child can tear through the material while sucking, or even pick up a new behavior, meaning wanting to chew on objects? And I might just jump in here first on this one, if it's okay, Annie, because I just wanted to mention my favorite company is actually out of Canada, and it's called Kids Companions, or They also have a brand called Sentio Chews. And Priscilla, I'll put the link in the comments for you. They are so durable. And one of the things I love about them is the lanyard that it comes with is organic material, because as you said, Priscilla, they will sometimes pick up the habit of chewing on the lanyard, and which is fine at first, but we naturally want it to be an organic material. It is ideal in my mind. But do you have, Annie, do you have any favorite companies that you like to purchase really strong, good, durable necklaces from?
Sure. I like what you've mentioned, but I also like jewelry, and I really like Chewy Tubes by Talk Tools.
I love Chewy Tubes.
But I have to say that using a Chewy alone is not going to get rid of the thumb sucking. That I really explained very clearly to parents that you could buy all of these things and not handle the habit. These are just tools, and the approach is much more comprehensive in getting the child to understand that they want to stop sucking their thumb and what's going to happen in their brain and what they're going to feel in order to handle this fight, this battle. And then the tools are there just as support.
Very good point. I love this question. Is there anything that can be done to help when a child is chewing or sucking on their tongue? Mm-hmm. I find that's a very common habit with my children who have Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it has to do with the way where their tongue rests in their mouth. It's kind of right there to suck on, but it's also not uncommon while they're sleeping. Annie, do you have any strategies that you could just share with the audience? I know they should visit someone like you, a certified orofacial myologist, but any tips that you can give them in the meantime?
Yeah, I think that you have to look at the tongue rest posture and where it's resting, and it's probably not resting where it should. So teaching the correct oral rest posture, teaching chewing patterns, but tongue sucking is difficult, and I think it's definitely the work of an orofacial myologist.
Absolutely. And I do like the idea of providing other things for kids to get that oral input. But as you said, and if I can just demonstrate for everyone, so often we will see children come to us who have a resting posture of their tongue, meaning the tongue is just relaxed in their mouth at a very specific spot. And Annie, feel free to chime in here, but it's typically sort of like this, or it's not sitting in between that beautiful arch of teeth and resting inside. When I'm talking to the kids, I always talk about it being inside the little bed, surrounded by all the teeth, you know. Instead, we really want the tongue to be resting like this. You can see all my teeth, and it's pulled back slightly and yet relaxed and stable rather than forward. And when kids have that more forward tongue posture, we often see them have increased drooling. We often see some speech challenges with that. We see tongue sucking will often go along with that. And of course, some difficulty with picky eating, which is my specialty, and swallowing, because we really want kids to develop what we call a mature swallow pattern. We start to see that emerge at about 12 months, but instead of suckling like this, right? They actually are raising up the tongue tip and swallowing like a grown-up. Although we certainly see grown-ups on our caseload too, don't we, Annie, who need some help with how to swallow correctly. Is there anything else that you'd like to contribute? I sort of jumped in there.
No, I think tongue sucking is definitely something that you want to address. It can make big changes in the dentition. But it's not a one-step answer. You really have to figure out why the tongue is sitting where it is, why it's suckable, and what you can do to teach the child. There are many tools available. I've used a MyoMunchie in this case, but really it's pretty specific to the child.
I love what you just said. It's suckable. That's so true. It's right there. Yeah. Here's one more great question, and we'll be maybe taking one or two more before we say goodnight. Don't forget about the discount code, everybody, that Casey's been posting for all of us. Renata asks, when do you do the tongue tie release if a child is a thumb sucker? Go ahead, Anne.
Again, I think that's case specific, because if there are real risks to the child with the tongue tie, the tongue tie should be released first. If, like in Cassidy's case, it was possible to help her eliminate the thumb habit and then go ahead with the tongue, that was good. A release is something that needs the work of a myofunctional therapist to prepare for and then to do the work afterwards. So really choosing the time of the release is best decided on how able the child is to participate in that kind of work.
Fantastic. I thought this was a great question that we have here from Kelly. She said, I'm a school-based speech-language pathologist and a mom of a 4-year-old thumbsucker. What resources would you recommend to help me help her stop? Where do I even start? I'm just going to jump in to say, Kelly, on my YouTube channel, and I'll post it and tag you, I have a short video on a few tips on how to help children stop thumb sucking. But what I also say in there is, if these tips aren't working for you, definitely seek out a certified orofacial myologist. And we can most often refer other speech therapists and parents to the International Association of Orofacial Myology. I'll put the link in there for you where you can find a professional in your area. Because like Annie, they are specifically trained to help a child go through a very systematic program to get to the point where they can say, I can do it, just as Annie was saying earlier. But it is an art, and it just like being a speech language pathologist, there isn't a magic recipe for every child. Annie is an expert at discovering what's best for that child, that family, and the particular situation that the child is dealing with, whether it's a tongue tie, whether it's picky eating, whether it's difficulty with articulation. There's so many factors that come into play here. Annie, I know you want to say something too. Go ahead.
No, I was completely agreeing with you. I think it's a very specific thing. My approach is a 60-day approach, but most of the kids I work with eliminate their thumb sucking on the first visit, and the rest is fine-tuning. I talk to the children I work with every night for the first week by phone. So it's very individual, it's very tailored, it's not long. So I'd be happy also to communicate with you on Facebook and answer more.
I bet Anne will go in later and put in her website and her Facebook page as well, so you can follow her there and get more information. Fantastic. Laura has a comment here. Let's see, it's a little bit long. Let me see if I can fit. Oh, it did fit all the way up there. Good. Hi, Laura. She says, and I'm an OT with a 4-year-old thumbsucker too. We've weaned off daytime thumb sucking thanks to your tips, Melanie. That's so great. But we are still working on fading out the nighttime one. Annie, if you just give one tip for those who are working on nighttime, I know they need to see a professional like you, but until they can have that appointment, what's the one tip you would recommend, Anne?
I would recommend more time with the child and helping them fall asleep. I think that's something that people have to work through at the beginning, is helping the child to fall asleep and helping them to use new strategies, whether that's chewing on a chewy or covering their hands, but they need the assistance of a parent to fall asleep because it's really hard without those neurotransmitters at the beginning.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, thank you so much for taking the time, and Anne, especially to you again. This is twice you've done this for me, for not only being here, but also bringing beautiful Cassidy and her mom, Shannon, to share their story. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I especially want to thank our sponsor, Holland Healthcare. There's my throat scope. I want you to be sure to check out their website because their new telehealth system is fantastic. I'm so excited about it. And they're going to be available soon, so you can go ahead and order them now. Alrighty, Annie, thank you so much. And bye-bye, everybody. Thanks again. You'll see me Monday on my Facebook page, My Munch Bug, Melanie Potock. And on Monday, we'll do a Facebook Live there as well. Many, many thanks to Holland Healthcare, Throat Scope, and Annie. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.